I have been watching my father die. And that's what we're going to talk about today.
This is really Just Stop. Here's Ross, the host with today's dose of common sense.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Yes, if you're a frequent listener, or you have been, you know that I haven't been around much, and I haven't done a show in several weeks. And it's because everything is going insane. As I said before the intro, yes, my father is currently in hospice care, and we're going to talk about that. But we've had other deaths in the family. We've had other illnesses in the family. When you get to be my age, I'm going to be 59. Everyone who was alive when you were born and grew up, they're at the age now where they're either already dead or they're going to be soon because they're into their 80s and sometimes their 90s by now. So it's, depressing. When you're young, it's occasionally you might have something happen, someone you went to school with or someone you were in the military with or an elderly relative or whatever. But a car accident. So you didn't go to funerals that often. But the older you get, the more often you're going to go to funerals and the more people you're going to know who pass away. So it's not a pleasant time, but it's all part of life. It's a part of the natural process of life. It's the culmination of your life. So, I don't know. Everybody's got a different take on it, different feelings about it, but that's what I've been dealing with. And so I just figured it'd be a good idea. It's a good idea. I'm having trouble speaking for some reason. I thought it would be a good idea to tell people why I haven't been around. And tell them hopefully in the near future I'll be able to get back to regularly scheduled programs. But I also wanted to tell people, I'm going to sip some coffee, so don't mind me. I thought I would tell people about my dad. So my dad is an interesting character. Grew up as just a poor boy on a mountainside in Oklahoma with a family that was dirt poor, lived in a shack on the side of Broken Mountain, which is east of Eufaula, Oklahoma, and came from nothing, basically hunted for his food. They had a vegetable garden and, did whatever work they could do to survive. And eventually the family started traveling around and working the harvests around the country. And basically as migrant farmers, I guess. So he picked cotton in the South. He picked fruits on the West Coast. He picked vegetables in the Midwest. He picked cherries and grapes and nuts and different things. So that's how they survived. And eventually settled in California where he wound up meeting my mother. And so that's how that went. But he had an interesting life, I guess. Just all of those travels, he experienced a lot of things. And he used to tell us all sorts of funny stories when we were little and about his travels and about his adventures in his early days. And you can tell from the pictures of him when he was young, he was a rowdy person. And some of the stories that he's told and others have told, my dad was a bit of a rowdy person, let's just say. He used to cause trouble, I guess, and he was not afraid to fight. He enjoyed a good fight now and then. And so, yeah, he was a handful. And men of that era, he was born in the early 40s, So he was a baby boomer. And, men of that era were just different. And especially if you were not born into wealth or privilege, he had a hard life. And so having a hard life meant you had to be a hard person. And that's what he was. He worked hard all the time. And he was just, they made them back then, those country boys. He was just like, like an ox. He was strong, had that old country boy strength. He wasn't a fitness guy, but just that manual labor your entire life. He was very strong, and he just worked all the time. He worked and took care of his family in whatever way he could do that. And he often had two jobs because one wasn't enough. And he was smarter than you would expect him to be. He only had an 8th grade education. He had to drop out of school and go to work and help support the family and stuff. So he never went back to school and finished or anything. He just made his way through life. He loved to read. And so that may be where I developed a love of reading things. But lots and lots and lots of memories. But he used to tell us some interesting stories, even that he wrestled a bear once. And so I finally, later in life, I was like, that can't be true. Or he was just telling us that. He was just screwing with us as kids. And so I asked him, just a couple of years ago or a year ago, whatever it was. I was like, you used to tell us that story about wrestling a bear. And I'm pretty sure that was bullshit. And he said, no, it's not. I wrestled a bear in Tacoma, Washington at the carnival. And apparently he did. He just was traveling around. He happened to be in Tacoma, Washington. He went to a carnival and they had a thing where you could wrestle a bear. So he did it. And so he wasn't afraid to try new things, I guess. And so lots of funny stories. He loved laughing. He was very witty, but he could also be very mean if he needed to be. And, he was very strict. He was kind of hard on us kids. He wanted us to be raised up right, but I don't have any issues with any of it. I mean, I wasn't abused. I wasn't mistreated or anything, but he did expect a lot out of us, especially with our conduct and how we behaved and things like that. But that was him. And in 2008, he finally, the last job he had, he started driving a truck. He had driven a truck before, but he wound up retiring from being a truck driver and finally got to retire and just try to relax a little bit. He was about 2 years into his retirement when he had a stroke, or two, possibly. Not only does that mess you up because you just had a stroke, but he also went blind as a result of his stroke. So he had spent the previous 2 years getting back into things that he loved, like skeet shooting and trap shooting. And he learned to play golf. He had never golfed before, but a friend of his played golf, and they were both retired now, so he took him and taught him how to play golf, and Dad was enjoying it. And Dad really enjoyed shooting sports. He's the reason why I got into shooting at a very young age, probably long before I should have. But he knew how to shoot. He taught us how to shoot. He was a really good shot. And maybe because he had to hunt for food when he was young. But he finally got a chance to do some of those things. He got a couple of years out of it, and then, poof, went blind, and he couldn't do them anymore. But he got by, and, I don't know, a few years ago, they diagnosed him with Parkinson's. And Parkinson's messes with you in numerous ways, not just physically, but also mentally. And it makes you hallucinate. And there are two types of hallucinations, because when you have Parkinson's causes hallucinations. But then they give you a medication to treat the Parkinson's, and that also causes hallucinations. So for my father, they were two different kinds of hallucinations. So he had before he started taking the Parkinson's medication, he would see things that just weren't there, but they were like real things that exist in reality, like a truck. He would just see a truck parked in front of the house, or someone left their dog over there, or there's a donkey walking through the backyard, things like that. But the medication would make him hallucinate different things, like fairy tale things, like literal fairies, or little people, doll-sized people who would just run around the house and like they were playing, and they would jump on the furniture and ride on the ceiling fan and things like that, and really kind of strange. But it was fascinating to me. I'm sure it's not. I'm sure a lot of people were probably frightened by it, but my dad didn't seem frightened by any of it. But it got to the point where I'm like, well, can you see them? He was like, clear as day. I'm like, well, that's when you know it's a hallucination, because you're blind or mostly blind. He could see light and shadow and things like that. But as for all intents and purposes, he was blind. And so I'm like, if you can see it clearly, obviously it isn't real. And so we kind of went off of that and just ran with it. But he got worse a few months ago, wound up in the hospital, and was having strange episodes, and health-wise and psychologically. And as he eventually was diagnosed also with dementia. And if you know anyone who's gone through the dementia thing, it progresses for some people slowly, for some people rapidly. For my father, apparently it was going pretty quickly. And so he is now in hospice care, and we don't know how long he has. I think they thought he would have been gone by now, but he's not. So, but he is getting to the point where he's essentially just there. He's unconscious and has to be taken care of. He can't take care of himself at all. So, but there's interesting things about it. I mean, of course, it's sad and it's tragic, but what they call transitioning now, they call it, transitioning. He's transitioning. And they said that about my father-in-law and stuff like that. And my uncle is also in the process of transitioning. But with the dementia, he would have times when he was completely lucid and had a clear head and could have a conversation with you, and other times he couldn't. So I felt that it was important that he understand what was happening. So in one of his moments of clarity, I told him he was dying. And I don't know if that's the thing to do or not, because it's a word that everyone, including the medical profession, was avoiding. And so it made me feel like they're not telling him the truth about what's happening to him. They're just telling him you're sick, or you're really sick right now, or you're getting, whatever. Instead of actually just telling him the truth, which was that he was dying. And I don't know if it was the right thing to do, but for me, it felt like the right thing to do. I don't want him to be surprised. You know what I mean? I needed him to know what was happening, because everybody else was not talking about it, to him anyway. And he just said, I knew this day was coming, because, I've listened to what the doctors are saying and your mom, and, so I figured that's what was going on. And the very first thing he did, once that topic was breached of, I'm sorry, Dad, but you're dying, you're approaching the end, the first thing he did was tell us all that he loved us. That was the most important thing for him to do. He said, I love you guys. I love you kids. Told my mom he loved her. And he wanted to make sure that was the thing that happened, that he was able to do that before he, got worse with his dementia. So he got that out of the way. And that was pretty meaningful. But he just talked for a while about, well, his quote is, "Time just ain't as long as it ought to be." And, just that's the truth. I'm sure everyone feels that way, that there simply isn't enough time to do all the things, to say all the things that you want to say, to do all the things that you want to do, and to experience everything you want to experience. And it's just not enough time. And it's true, it's not. And a lot of people's lives are tragically cut short. And he's had a full life. He's in his mid 80s. So he's lived a long life. And so a lot of people don't get that privilege to live that long. But, even in those cases, I'm sure it feels like there simply isn't enough time to do it all and to make sure that everything is the way that it ought to be. So time just ain't as long as it ought to be, according to my father, and I think that's a worthy quote. I'm not going to put it on his tombstone, but I would. If I didn't think my mom would get pissed off at me, I would put that on his tombstone, because it's the truth. And one of the last things my father was able to tell me when he was coherent was that phrase. And so that's going to stick with me forever. He doesn't talk anymore. He can't communicate. He doesn't know who I am. It was soon after that he was not able to recognize who I was. And so that's an interesting thing to go through. And then he thought I was my uncle. And then he thought I was my cousin. And he thought I was everybody but me. And it's interesting dealing with the dementia, because you can't straighten them out. You can't tell them, like, I don't know. Some people deal with it by like, no, you're wrong. No, we're not in Idaho. We're in Utah or whatever. I mean, why argue with the person? The person has no idea what's going on. They don't know who they are anymore. They don't know who you are. They don't know what's happening to them. And it's got to be a very scary thing. And I can see that. And I know this is very personal, and it might be touching something for people who went through this before, and I'm sorry, but he sometimes gets a look in his eye like he's frightened, even though he can't talk and he can't see. His eyes are open and he's looking off into nothing, but he looks like he's frightened or he's confused. So we don't know what's going on inside of his head. We do know that he spends a lot of time moving his arms around, almost like he's working somehow, doing something, and he will spend hours doing that. So I don't know if in his brain he thinks he's working and he's doing some sort of manual labor, but he makes repetitive motions for hours, and then he'll fall back to sleep, and then he'll open his eyes and start doing it again, like he's on the job still, in his hospital bed, which was a very helpful thing, was getting the hospital bed from the hospice people. He's at home, so they brought a hospital bed for him. It's a lot more comfortable for him, and my mother doesn't have to try and move him from place to place because he was no longer able to walk and hold himself up. So I got tired of picking him up off the floor and those sorts of things. So at least he's safe now, and don't know how much more time he has with us, but I hope he goes peacefully, and that he gets what he wants. Because, another thing that people talk about with people who are dying is that they start having visions, and not just hallucinations, but strange things that have to do with traveling, that they're leaving, that they know they're going somewhere. And they'll say things like they need to go on a trip, they need to take a trip. My father started doing that a couple of months ago, where he would say, I need to go home. I got to get up and get my stuff because I got to go home. Let's go home. And we would tell him, you are home. And he was like, this ain't my home. Like, yeah, this is where you live. He's like, no. And after a while, he would calm down, but that would come back up every once in a while. I need to go home. It'll get me out of here. I got to get out of this bed. I need to go home. And it didn't mean anything when we would tell him. you are home. It didn't seem to affect his mentality about it at all. One time I asked him where he lived and where he thought he was going, and he said the name of a town in California where he never lived, ever. So that was weird. You would think somebody would pick something from 60 years ago. They lived there. So, and they're in their mind now with dealing with dementia, they think they still live there. But it was a town he's never lived in. It wasn't far from where we used to live, but that one was a little strange. But then he started having hallucinations that he was being told to get on a train or on a bus. Sometimes it was a bus. And he would be acting like he was trying to get out of his recliner. This was before the hospital bed. And I would say, where do you think you're going, Dad? And he would say, I guess I got to get on that bus over there. And he would be trying to get up. I'm like, you can't get up. He's like, but I have to go. I have to get on that bus. Or another day he would say it was a train. And he would be giggling and looking off in the distance and trying to get out of his recliner. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, well, that conductor over there is telling me that this is my train. I got to get on this train. Very strange. But if you research that a little bit, you'll see that that's common with people who are approaching the end of their life. And I don't know what that is. They know, maybe it's subconsciously, they know they're dying and they know that they are leaving. And so their mind makes up these things, or it's real, like some sort of a spiritual thing. Who knows? But it happens very often and frequently with people who are approaching the end of their life, apparently. And I had already studied that and researched that and read about it before my father started doing this, because I saw the writing on the wall a couple of years ago that this was, he was not long for this earth. And to be honest, I didn't think he would be alive today. I thought he would pass before, but he's a tough old fart, so he's toughing it out. But I had read about that before, and I listened to a couple of podcasts about it, and it struck me as odd. But sure enough, my father started doing it, and I didn't talk to him about it before that, so I know he didn't hear it from somebody. He just started doing it. He started having these hallucinations or visions that he was leaving, that he needed to get on this transport of some way, of some kind, You get on that train or get on that bus because he had somewhere to go. And if he was still cognizant of what he was saying, he would say that, he was on his way home to go to heaven. At one time he did talk about he was going to see his mom, because his mom passed away decades ago, and back in the 80s. But he saw her once. He was talking to her and things like that. So who knows? The whole life and after death conversation is something I've never really talked about. I've contemplated it a lot throughout my lifetime, but I would have written all this stuff off to bullshit. It's just something that the brain does to cope with what's happening. But who knows? I don't know. I don't have the right or the authority to say none of that's real, none of it's true. My wife told me that she thinks at the end of your life you have a brief moment where you get to know everything, and then poof, you're gone. But that energy can't be destroyed. Energy just transforms into a different form. So if that's all true, then, maybe he is just changing buses, or he's just going from one train to another, and he's just on his way to whatever the next adventure is going to be. But when it does finally happen, we're all going to miss him. He was a character. He was funny. He's told me so many stories. He taught me so many things about life. And, I don't know. I always wondered, everybody has regrets, so don't even start with the whole regrets thing. But you wonder, you always wonder as a parent, you're like, could I have been a better father? But sometimes you wonder if you could have been a better son. And, we'll see. But that's what I'm doing. When that's over, I will try to get back into the swing of things. But for now, just wish me well. And I will, I hate the word transition. I don't like the way they talk about this stuff. So, anyway, I'll be working with my father until this is over. So, and I'll be back, and we'll talk about some more weird stuff. Tell me your thoughts. Leave a comment. Do something. But until then, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other, and tell people how you feel about them before it's too late.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Really? Just Stop with your host, Ross. Make sure to like and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform so that you never miss a dose of some common sense.